Welcome to Feminine Roadmap Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Farrar. Each week, I bring you an inspiring conversation to help you navigate the challenges and changes of midlife so that you can not only survive, but thrive in your second half. Today on Feminine Roadmap, we are going to be talking about empty nesting and finding your path again. How this season of life is the time to really start taking care of yourself and establish lifestyle habits that will take you well into your golden years to make those years even more golden. So please stay tuned. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here, and I am here with a message of hope and possibility. My guest today is Dr. Eudene Harry. She specializes in integrative wellness, and we are going to be talking about empty nest season of life and finding your path again. So without further ado, I would like to welcome and thank you, Dr. Eudene, for joining me on my program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. And before we hit record, as always, I chit-chat with who I'm interviewing, and turns out that we are both extremely excited about running to the end of the line. So I was wondering, Dr. Eudene, what is it that got you interested in integrative medicine, as well as really looking at midlife as a great opportunity to launch the best years of your life? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I started my integrative practice in 2005, and that was about a good 13 years after working as an emergency room physician. And what I was noticing, even for myself, is that we were not, for me, I felt that I saw a lot of the same things in the emergency department that were lifestyle related. And I thought, you know what, it's time to change that. And I was having some of these issues myself, and I needed to really explore that again. And so I went off, and what I always do, I went off and did a lot of studying with the Integrative Fellowship, and then decided to open my own practice. And over the course of that time, I really began to appreciate what the challenges that women had. And after approaching midlife myself and going through the emptiness process myself and identifying with a lot of my patients and what they were going through, I realized that there was definitely a need there for the message that this is the time for you to grab a hold of your life again and start putting it on path so you can have a really good golden years.
It's really awesome to have someone who is in the medical field, ER especially. We were just recently in the emergency room with my mother-in-law, and that is quite a chaotic environment. And there's so much immediate response that has to take place, right? You're trying to prioritize the injuries, if you will, or prioritize the medical emergencies. And I see a nice correlation between our lives, right? Our lives become like emergency rooms sometime. It's like one emergency after other. And we're trying to prioritize all of what we would see as chaos in our life. And we're kind of responding to the hottest or the closest fire, right? In our lives.
Right.
So how did you utilize your skills as an emergency room doctor and apply them to your life? Like what you were learning there and how to prioritize chaos?
Well, what I learned in the emergency department is that you had to be prepared. The system had to be prepared. There had to be a system in place in order to handle this chaos well. So while to many people it seemed chaotic, in reality there was a system in place and everything was being taken care of before the chaos started. And what I was noticing with my patients is a lot of them, the first thing that went out of the window was self-care. And so you were constantly putting out fires, but you were exhausted while you were doing so, and you were literally draining energy. And because you had none of that energy and clarity, because there was nothing in place to replenish that, it just spiraled out of control. And so in the emergency department, we learned that in order to have things work in chaos, there has to be preparedness behind the scenes.
So what I hear you saying is the chaos itself can happen and will happen, but if we have appropriate systems in place, we can actually function positively in that environment.
Yes, yes, indeed. Because chaos oftentimes, as you and I both know, we don't always have control over what is about to happen around us or what happens around us. What we might be able to control a little bit more is our response and how we respond and the clarity with which we respond. And in order to do that, we have to be in a place where we have the clarity and the energy to do that.
Isn't it interesting how easy that becomes normal, though, to live in the chaos, like you're saying, and to get to the place where you're almost addicted to that constant emergency?
Yes.
What does that do to our system?
It drains us completely. It drains our energy. It drains our focus. It drains our ability to sleep. It drains our ability to make good choices, like in what foods we choose to eat, because we know that that's nourishing. It literally takes everything away from us. It's like being in a constant state of stress. And the body is designed to handle stressful situations, but not chronic, ongoing, putting out fires all the time without replenishing. So no system is designed to do that. There's no system that I know of that's designed to function without replenishing. And so the body's it's no different. So we become at that point not helpful to anyone, so least of all ourselves.
Dr. Eudene, what kind of body signals, because if somebody's living in a chronic state of stress and chaos, they're not really aware, right, of their bodies and their minds. So what could kind of make them realize, other than the fact that people, that they're falling into bed and not sleeping well, what are some of the body signals we can look for?
Oh, the body signals can be numerous, because we know literally about 75 to 80% of doctors' visits are related to stress. So you can be having chronic headaches or chronic abdominal pains or chronic digestive issues, or just fatigue, and you're not really sure why, because you feel that you're sleeping well. It could express itself as weight gain. It can express itself as foggy thinking. It can even express itself as early onset of what we generally categorize as menopausal symptoms, but in reality, it's just really being exacerbated by stress, and stress leading to poor lifestyle choices. So you can get a variety of things, which can include even from alopecia. It exacerbates autoimmune conditions. So these are all the things that can happen when we're living under chronic stress. And it's one of the things I try to ascertain with my patients, which is why initially when I see them, I spend like a good hour to an hour and 15 minutes just really trying to get a sense of their lifestyle and the environment in which they're existing, because it really does tell me a lot.
What is unique about the empty nest season of life? We talked a little bit before we hit record that we have to recognize, there are stages of life. This is just a transition. Mm-hmm. It's not the end of the road. It's the beginning of a new journey. But how does the stress of empty nest, how can women and men take the stress of empty nest and really turn it into the next platform for the new path that they're going to take?
Oh, absolutely. Because what can happen with when your kids go off is that it depends really on if you've identified yourself very strongly with being a parent, and then you identify yourself very strongly with having someone need you all the time. You can become fearful that you're no longer needed, that you're no longer valuable, that you're no longer valued. And of course, there's the sadness of them going off and the sadness of them not being in your presence. And then there becomes the anxiety of not knowing what's going on and all of these things. And oftentimes that can be transitional by allowing both of you to adjust to those things, because you've raised them to be independent adults. But it's scary when they start becoming independent adults. And so this can be a transitional time for the both of you. However, becoming profoundly stuck in that place can lead to major depression, significant anxiety, and it can lead you to then maybe not start taking care of yourself. And then that can spiral out of control. So empty nest syndrome is the empty nest time. I don't even want to say syndrome. The empty nest time is really a time of change, and for both of you to start developing into who you're now becoming, which is really an exciting time, because this is the time now where you've raised them to be independent. They've gone off, and now you've got the time to develop the things that always been passionate to you, that perhaps you've put on the back burner for a little while you were going through this phase of your life. So now you can bring those things forward again. But the key thing in bringing those things forward is to know that you want to be healthy and be able to participate in them, like you and I talked about. It's like, so now now is the time we should want to do everything and explore everything, because the brain doesn't stop working when you're in midlife, contrary to popular belief. We can still nourish our brains and grow new brain cells and make new connections, and all of these things that science is telling us now that actually happen and can happen in midlife when we do the things that help to nourish that.
It's so powerful to realize how much brain science is confirming the fact that we have so much capacity for change, right? For
Yes.
to grow and become and evolve into whatever it is we want to. It's not like you're going to flip a switch and become that. That's why I use the word evolve. I'm not using it in the
Yes.
humanistic sense, but the idea that, I can set my intention in my mind. I just did an interview with a guy, and it was all about mindset, and it was fantastic because neuroscience really supports what you do. You're giving people tools that literally helps them change the neurons and the neural connections and the pathways in the brain when we set up systems, if you will, and intentions to move us in a positive direction. But it can also be done in a negative direction, or you wouldn't have a job as a doctor, right?
Yes, absolutely. It can also be done negatively. And so it's just finding that balance that works for you. Because sometimes I see that when some individuals, when they're going into the middle age process, they really start looking at that as a negative thing. And so they start becoming obsessively involved with things that you cannot change. I cannot change the fact that I am 53. I'm enjoying it, actually. And so I don't, if we can't spend the energy obsessively holding on to things that have passed, because now we need to move forward. And so when that becomes that negative, it becomes negative in a way that, the serenity prayer, the things you cannot change, you cannot change. So enjoy and explore the things that you can.
Now, you said something, I like the way you phrased this, letting go of the past, but I like the wording that you use, which is don't obsessively hold on to the past. What are the impacts that you see in what you do as an integrative wellness doctor to people who are obsessively holding on to the past?
Well, they have an inability to see the future. Because the only direction they're looking at. And so things do change, and change is not bad. Change is just different. And so when things change, there's a requirement to adjust around that so you can get the maximal benefit of that change. So our bodies do change. For example, it becomes harder for us to start holding on to nutrients. If we refuse to accept that fact, we can become nutrient deficient. If we accept that fact, we start saying, okay, how can we maximize the nutrients that we're getting? And then we start doing those things, and then we start feeling better. When you're obsessively holding on to the past, the capacity to feel better becomes very limited because I cannot treat something that was in the past. I can only treat something that's happening now. And so we can really become just wanting to be that thing, also to the point of injuring ourselves, to the point of doing things that are not safe for ourselves, to the point of making those kinds of decisions. And so when I see that, that becomes really challenging, but it's something that I usually have to sit down and address and see what is that about, and see how we can adjust around that.
When it comes to what you do as an integrative wellness doctor, and you're talking about nutrient deficiencies, hormonal imbalances,
Mm-hmm.
things like that, stressors like empty nest, can that impact that baseline of health in that way? Like, could potentially the stress of that throw off our hormones? Can it throw off those things, kind of impact them?
Oh, it absolutely can. Because our hormonal system and our stress system, it's pretty much using the same highway, let's just say. They start from the same starting point. And so if we are drawing significantly from one path of that divide, the other part is going to get depleted relatively quickly. And so we can absolutely create an imbalance relatively quickly. If we get stuck, it doesn't really matter what the stressor is. And so emptiness can become a prolonged stressor, like anything else. If that transition doesn't happen and we get stuck in that phase of sadness, of feeling lonely, of feeling no longer needed, if we get stuck in that phase and we get stuck in depression and we get stuck in that phase, yeah, absolutely, we can drastically throw off our hormonal levels.
What are some great kind of strategies that someone can use to navigate an empty nest situation in a more supportive and, empowering way? What would you say to someone who is going into or going through the empty nest season of their life?
Well, what I would say to them is address the issues at hand. So if the issues are anxiety or stress about what's happening with your child at school when they're away, address that issue. You like I said before, you've raised them to be independent, intelligent adults. So create something that works for the both of you, whether that's just checking in once a week, a couple of times a week, once a day, something that allows you to be able to let go of that. The other thing that I can say, start establishing healthier habits for yourself as well. And hopefully that has been going on and with prior to, but it's really important that you do that now, because you and I both know when we get into that phase of sadness, even though it's temporary, it can lead us to maybe choose nutrients that don't really support our brain power, for example. It doesn't support our energy system and kind of fuel the depressive symptoms. And so we reach for things that might make us feel good for about a few minutes, but then in reality, it actually makes our brain power worse. I want to say this is a time to actually start social connections and develop social connections and really strengthen social connections and relationships because it's a new time for that. And we know that loneliness definitely can create and exacerbate chronic illnesses. We know that people who have strong social ties do better and get through stressful situations better, especially for women. We tend to release more of that feel-good oxytocin when we're around our friends or female friends. And so we're able to establish those kind of relationships. This is a good time. It's a good time to start activity programs. While you can do that in social groups, and then you get in a double bonus for that. And I'm not talking about obsessively exercising for 2 to 3 times a day. I'm just talking about getting moving, because we know, for example, early morning exercises changes the brain significantly and help us make better decisions throughout the day. So it's a great time because you no longer have to think about taking anyone to school or picking anyone up, or they're now becoming independent. So it kind of frees your time up to start doing those kinds of things. And so these are habits that I would say we need to start being more diligent about and be proactive about. Pick up the phone, join a group, hang out with your girlfriends, go on date nights. Just stuff that really have been proven to improve our health and help us to make better decisions.
Something that comes to mind, Dr. Eudene, is really thinking about asking ourselves the question of identity, like, who am I? Is not in a negative way, but like, who am I? What have I done? And honoring the value of that journey that we've taken, if we've had children and raised them, and honoring the work that we've put in and the people that they've become, and giving ourselves permission to ask the question, now who do I want to be? What skills and abilities and experiences in the past can I bring forward to help create this future? It's not, I think some people feel like it's like cutting off a limb, but it's actually just like a fork in the road. It's like another, it's like you're in this river of life and there's these rocks and you just have to flow around them, right? It's not, I think the way we view the change, and you can probably speak to this from the medical side, how we view the change really impacts the success of the change.
Absolutely. How we view the change is important, because we know also they've done recent studies on optimistic people sleep better. So it's optimistic people's brain function better. Of course, it's just a way that we view it actually allows us to see the possibilities, and that helps us to move forward and realize that it's not an end, it's actually a beginning. So viewing things that way really helps us to transition through this empty nest period.
I know a lot of women especially can get very lost in their identity as a mom, because it's probably one of the more labor-intensive things that we will ever do.
It is.
Not only is it labor-intensive, but the amount of emotion that we pour into it, and the amount of years, really, that we put into it is significant.
Yes.
And someone like me, I always wanted to be a parent like that. People were like, what do you want to do when you get out of high school? I'm like, well, eventually I want to get married and have children. Like, legitimately, that was what I wanted to do. And I found that it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Hardest thing. When you parent, pretty much everything in your life that's a flaw becomes highlighted,
Yes.
And I think we can take those years of parenting, Dr. Eudene, and we can really think about honoring the journey that we've taken, the changes that we've made, and actually use it as a blueprint for this next season of life. Wouldn't you agree? That's 20 to 30 years of your life that you've developed skills and abilities, hopefully good ones, and then looking at even the unhealthier ones and saying, what do I want to do differently in this next season of my life?
Oh, absolutely. Being a parent, you are absolutely right. I've done, and you have as well, many things in the course of my life. But being a parent has definitely been the most challenging thing. And you do develop skills that perhaps you're not even giving yourself credit for. You are a psychologist. You are a therapist. You've become a pretty good chef and caterer and figuring out what everybody else needs. You've become very good at reading situations. So you have so many talents that you have developed while being a parent. You're absolutely right. Honor that journey. Look at the things that you have actually learned and mastered from being a parent, and take those things and move forward. And it's like anything else in our life. If there's something that didn't quite work out the way you wanted it to work out, now is the time to start addressing that as well. So I think absolutely this is the way we look at it. Yes, we've identified ourselves as a mom or as a parent, but let's expand the meaning of that. Now that they have gone and they're now trying to develop independent lives, it doesn't make you any less skilled. It doesn't make you any less a mom. It actually makes you more, because now you're able to develop even more skills and take those things and move forward with it.
I think the multitasking aspect that you're talking about is you're saying, you've learned to manage your schedule, however many children's schedule, your husband's schedule,
Yes.
and you might have worked as well. And all of these things, we really have been like superpower multitaskers. And I think there's a certain kind of coming into this season where our parents might be aging and we might have to multitask that, but there is a certain sense of less people to be concerned about if we can allow the children to live their own lives.
Yes. And doesn't that have a sense of being a little bit more free? It does. You do have, now you can let go of scheduling everybody else and start thinking, okay, what do I do with that time? What do I want to learn? So I totally agree with that. Now, so if we allow it to be, it really can be the best time of our lives.
I love that question you just phrased, which is, what do I want to learn?
Yes.
There's a lot of people who go back to school or go back into learning, and because they've experienced so much life, it has more impact and meaning to them now because they're doing it in a season that they're desiring to take in that information. So the success rate's increasing incredibly in learning because we're ready and willing.
Yes. Learning at this time, I have found that it seems to come just more naturally, because now, absolutely, as a 20-something-year-old, you feel like, oh, I can't believe they're going to make me go to class. I want to do this. But at this age, when you ask yourself, what is it I want to learn? You're excited about it. And you get to choose what it is you want to learn. And it's great.
And, I think some people should probably consider sitting back and kind of evaluating maybe things that they've forgotten they were interested in. We really have given our lives to the interests of our children, and we might have loved the things they did. I did. My kids play sports, and I love sports. My husband's an athlete. And so for us, sports was life, and so I loved it 150%, and it became literally the central thing in our home. But at some point, you realize, you know what? I loved that. Now what would I love to do? It may be something completely different. And I think sometimes we forget to just kind of go back and go, what did I used to love to do? Like, what was that thing?
Yes. And that's actually an exercise I do with some of my patients. I just simply asking them that question and have them think about it. And it's interesting. Initially, they go, I don't know.
Yeah, like they totally lost touch, right?
Yes. But eventually, when they do start, going, they're like, wow, I did enjoy doing that, or I did enjoy doing that. Oh, I've always wanted to do this. I have one patient who'd say, you know what? I've always wanted to play the guitar. And what's stopping you from learning to play the guitar? At this point, nothing, really.
And you know what? Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Eudene, that it doesn't have to be for any other purpose than it brings you pleasure?
That's it. That's the beautiful time of the beauty about this time is that it doesn't have to be for anything else that more than it brings you joy. And when you're learning from that place, there's nothing like it. You want to do more and learn more.
Right. Instead of I have to.
Yes.
Now I want to.
Now I want to.
How do people learn to set boundaries in empty nesting? How do you help them kind of, not that the children are requiring something of them, but sometimes we have to set boundaries with ourselves. Right?
Yes. Yes, we do have to set boundaries with ourselves, and in terms of, and it's challenging, and I can certainly understand that it's challenging, but it's not, you've got to understand that you are really not supporting your children's growth if you don't start creating boundaries for yourself about that, about how much you interfere, about how much you hover, about how much you're not giving them the opportunity to learn to navigate themselves. And that's not fair to them, just like it's not fair to you. So it's really learning to say, okay. And that's why I ask people to have a discussion with the child, because oftentimes, they'll tell you. You may not want to hear it. They'll tell you, and start respecting that, because you've over the course before they got to this point, you've been giving them more and more responsibilities, and know that they can handle it, and you're there if they need you. But you cannot live their life and yours at the same time. So now it's time to let them do theirs, and it's time for you to move forward and do yours in a healthy way, because you really do not want to be approaching 60s and 70s not healthy, not full of life, not vibrant. Because I've seen both. I have 80-year-olds that play tennis still they can certainly whip my behind on the court. And, then I've got,
I've got 65. I'm going to lose.
Exactly. That's how I feel with them. And then I've got the 65-year-olds, and, they act 80, and, they've got so many issues that you feel that they're 80 or 85. So it really is a perfect time. It's not too late at this time, and don't get discouraged about it. It's just a perfect time to start focusing on true self-care, because you may, like you mentioned before, be at some point when perhaps you need to start taking care of your parents, or at least helping them through, and you've got to be in a place where you're able to do that. So many people say self-care is not being selfish and self-centered. It's really being in the best place possible so you can handle the things around you.
What are the best, when it comes to self-care, I think a lot of people think you have to spend a lot of money. You got to have a spa day. No. People think kind of big picture things when you talk about self-care. So when you're talking about self-care, Dr. Eudene, what kind of things are you prescribing people consider doing?
I prescribe very simple things like a morning walk. That's taking the time out before you start your day and jump into the craziness to do things that make you feel centered. And so it may be a walk in the morning. It may be sitting and watching the sunset with a cup of tea before you even, the sunrise, before you even start your day, or at the end of your day. And so it's like you can take tiny breaks. You don't have to spend huge amounts of money. You don't have to have that resources. It's making choices that helps you to feel better. So it may be the foods that you eat that's taking care of yourself. It may be taking a time out during the middle of the day just to go for a walk on your lunch break, sitting in nature, just kind of watching the birds around you or the trees around you. Self-care, it does not have to, you don't have to go away to Bali for a week in order to take care of yourself. In fact, it's the daily things that really count. So it may be taking 10 minutes to meditate in the morning, 10 minutes to journal in the morning, to talk about things that you've enjoyed in your life, or things that you're looking forward to, or things that you're grateful for. It's taking the time to do those things that actually start generating those feelings of optimism.
Mm.
So, and it also involves going and getting your checkups and seeing where you are and checking your numbers and seeing if your lifestyle is working for you. It's very, very simple things. And you know that it's working because you start, again, feeling more optimistic.
I was listening to you and thinking, Dr. Eudene, when you talk about daily self-care habits, like just little things each day, would you agree that there are cumulative benefits to those habits? Like, we don't see the 5 or 10 minutes as a big deal, but don't they have cumulative benefits as we practice them regularly?
They do have cumulative benefits because what they're doing is teaching your body how to respond. It's teaching your body to relax. It's teaching your body that you deserve to take 5 minutes out of the day to feel better. So that's the message that you're sending on a daily basis when you're doing these things. You're sending the message to your body that, yes, you deserve to feel better. You deserve the better things. You deserve to be healthier. And so when you consistently send those messages, your body will start accepting that, and you will start believing it. But if you're consistently depriving yourself daily and pushing the things out that help you to feel that way because you feel you don't have the time, then you're sending the message to your body that your health is not important, that you're not important. And that message is not, no one feels good receiving that message. If you said that message to anyone consistently, it doesn't feel good and it doesn't help them to be any healthier. So yes, it is cumulative.
I love how you put it in the brain science realm. I actually, you talk about, what do I want to learn? I want to learn all there is about neuroscience. And I think epigenetics is fascinating because there's something to be said for our mindset toward, like, well, in our family, we're all heavy, or in our family, blah, 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 blah. But really understanding that there is some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? We have the ability to manipulate, if you will, the genetics by the decisions that we make. Have you seen those studies where you take twins who've lived completely different lives? And it's amazing to see. And it's never too late. Wouldn't you agree? Because these two, you take twins and they live these different lives, and you can see the age on one and the other one looks healthy or whatever. And they can really bring it down to, okay, they have the exact same genetics. These might be, sharing the same, they came from the same mom, they came from the same, what do they call that when they're not separate eggs, they were like one egg that split or whatever. I can't remember what that's called. Right. So they're literally identical down to their core, but yet they got different results. That's one of the most powerful examples, I think, of really recognizing that we do not have to make agreement with overall attitudes and opinions in our families, in our friend groups, or whatever. We have the autonomy to stand up and say, I'm going to have a different outcome, not judging other people, but choosing on our own that, what do I want my life to look like? What quality of life do I want to live?
Right. Absolutely. When you mention epigenetics, I mean, that's what it is. Your environment turns on or off your genes. So you can have the, quote, genetics. They don't have to be active. So it's what you do in the environment oftentimes that determines how your genes express themselves. And so we do have the choice. And oftentimes if we tell ourselves the story that, it's always this way in my family, then, there's no incentive for you to explore the fact that, was it always that way because the environment was always the same? And then if I change the environment, would I get a different result? And science is telling us, yes, you do get a different result. And so our environment is literally, it's the code for our genes to decide, oh, okay, so this is what we're doing. The genes are there, but the environment tells it what to do. And there are very few genetic conditions that are just purely genetic, where you ultimately will have whatever it is, but most genetic conditions and most genes can be activated or deactivated based on what we choose. So it's important to know that, and it makes us feel, I would think it would help me to feel less helpless about that, because you do have a choice.
What an incredibly powerful thing. If you think about in terms like empty nest, for example, the beliefs that people have about emptiness, the beliefs that people have about midlife. And when those two things collide and add aging parents to that, there's a very powerful impact on our mental health and our mindset if we choose to make agreement with, and I'm in the midst of recognizing that I have to change my attitude, not attitude, but my mindset, the way I'm speaking about the frustrations, because it does begin to affect your body. And if you're paying attention to your body as an integrative wellness doctor, there's a huge part of training people, I would think, if I understand it correctly, to become connected, mind, body, and spirit, kind of get in tune with what's happening, no longer seeking a quick fix, but getting to the place where you can hear what your body is saying. And I think as you and I begin to make agreement with things and believe things or allow certain mindsets to take root in our hearts, our bodies, they're so integrated. And I think that's what integrative medicine means. You're a whole person. You can't separate those things. So let's talk a little bit about that. How what you do, the mind, body, and spirit, helping people understand we can't compartmentalize. It doesn't happen. We are always functioning on all of those levels. Am I right?
Absolutely. We're always functioning in all of those levels. One thing always impacts the other. And I don't recall who said this, but I think it's the best analogy I've heard is just you simply, it's just you can't pee in one end of the pool and it goes everywhere. So everything about you impacts everything about you. So you're always living in those areas. And so we can't say for example, what we think about doesn't impact our hearts. I mean, right now there's so many studies on the heart that tells us that stress makes it worse. Stress can literally break our hearts, and it can literally cause it to stop functioning properly. Your thoughts can do that. So our environment, what we think, we have to understand that that's a major part of our environment. That's the part that's with us 24/7. That's the part that we cannot leave. Like I can leave Florida and go to California and change my environment, but my thoughts go with me 24/7. So that's a big part of our environment constantly. So when we say get out of a smoking environment, we can do that. But if our thoughts are just as toxic as the smoke, we have to change that internally because that's not something we can pick up and leave. So all of that is part of our environment.
You said something that really stuck out to me. And you said that, we can change environments, we can change jobs, we can change marriages, we can change sizes, we can change hair color, we can change our makeup, we can run as far as we want to, but we can never run away from our minds and what we really believe and make agreement with. Like that is the thing. If we look at our lives and we see patterns of things we don't like, I think there's a certain need to stop and say, what's the common denominator here? It might be you and it might be me.
It might be
really, right? Taking personal responsibility for that, because none of these changes that we're talking about, Dr. Eudene, none of these transitions will come easily or maybe possibly not come if we don't stand in our own power and really recognize our responsibility, both positively and negatively in our situation.
Yes.
How does that affect a person's health?
Oh, it absolutely can. When you are in a situation or when you identify a pattern as being, that similar things keep happening, then you really do have to step back and say, well, what is it that I'm contributing to that happening? Because if you do not recognize it, it will continue to happen. And things tend to get worse and not better without intervention as a general rule. So if you're not able to stand in your truth and stand in that discomfort of it initially, because it's not, of course, you don't want it to be so. It doesn't, but I ask people to understand this is not saying that you're a bad person at all, whatever it is. It's just saying this is something that no longer serves your purpose. Mm-hmm. So identifying it and changing it then leads to different results.
You said, what doesn't serve you? I do use that phrase in my coaching. You know, that may have served you in the past, but does it still serve you?
Right.
Is this an obsolete habit, or is this an obsolete mindset that is now actually causing you more stress, or causing this transition, say an empty nest, to be more difficult?
Right. And it can.
And doing that work is so important, because when you talk about integrative health, which I highly admire integrative health, because I think that the idea of acknowledging the wholeness of who we are and seeing symptoms, like even an empty nest, if we're feeling depressed or overtired, or we're lethargic, or we're, avoiding, or whatever it is, those are all symptoms of a greater cause. Wouldn't that be true?
Yes.
So
yes.
Integrative medicine says, and correct me if I'm wrong, the symptom is the messenger to point you back to the actual root, which a lot of times, from what I'm hearing you say, actually starts between our ears in what we choose to think and believe.
Yes. I love what you said. The symptom is just the messenger. And that's often what I tell my patients, is that what is the message that the symptom is trying to tell us? Because the symptom is not the problem. It's just letting you know that there is a problem. So what is that message? So yeah, I totally agree with that.
That's a powerful question. What is the message the symptom is trying to tell you? Let's put this into context. So let's say we're empty nesting. You and I are really good friends, and we're both just in the throes of, I've lost my identity. I'm not sure what to do with myself, right? And maybe you're having chronic headaches, and maybe I'm having difficulty sleeping. Let's say that's what it is. And we say, okay, together, what is the message the symptom is trying to tell you? We can begin to kind of zoom back a little bit, like zoom out, and have that community that you were talking about earlier help us process through it. Because I think self-introspection is like a hobby of mine, and it's not always a good hobby, but it could be very obsessive, as a matter of fact. But I think having another person look into your frame, someone that's healthy and trustworthy and whatever, I think we can take a situation like empty nest and the symptoms that we're feeling and get together with someone and ask those questions together and link arms and kind of journey into what are the tools and resources at our fingertips to really recognize that we get to choose whether we feel that depression long term. Like, of course we're going to be sad, but does that mean that's going to identify who I am for the next 5 years? Like, do I want to lose 5 years of my life to this emotion?
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly that.
So when you talk about emotions, I don't know, do you talk with your clients about, almost like a coach would, about how emotions really, we're leading with emotions and the stress that causes versus leading with intention and what we're choosing to do in mindset? Do you do a lot of helping people with that in terms of their health?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a big part of health. And in fact, oftentimes, it feels like, the majority of an office visit might be about that. I become like the unintentional psychologist or therapist, because it's just part of it's a part of health, and so we have to talk about it and point it out. And I may initially encounter some resistance And I have to say, more often than not, after some time has gone by, my clients very often go, okay, now I see what your point was, because it's never done in a way that would make you feel attacked. It's just an observation. And like you said, sometimes it's difficult for you to see your own stuff.
Yeah, because it's super comfy, like your old pair of sweats right there.
Yes, yes, it is. So having an outside person that does have really your best interest. I mean, they want you to be healthy. So that's really the goal. Then yeah, you can sort of take a walk on that side. So to answer your questions, I can sometimes spend a significant amount of time talking about that, because it's just where we are in that process to get to the next step. So while we're doing our due diligence and looking at all the lab work, et cetera, there's this part that also needs to be done. So then I usually tell people nothing is, like we've talked about before, they're not mutually exclusive, they're intertwined. And so you have to deal with all of them.
I'm very fascinated, Dr. Eudene, with the whole, not on a metaphysical, like mind, body, spirit, but just the fact that we are designed that way. And there's this learning. I think we instinctively know, but the busyness of our world, we become segmented in our own bodies, if you will, where we, in learning to integrate those things, is very challenging, I think, because we do get so used to the fragmented living versus the holistic living.
Yes, we do. We are taught to compartmentalize. I mean, that's really, if you're looking around at our society, everything seems to be very compartmentalized. Even in medicine, at times, it can be that way, where we think one organ doesn't impact the other organ, which is insane, because of course it does, but our thinking is that way. And so oftentimes, that whole, can't see the forest for the trees thing is very true. Sometimes we need to take a step back and see how the whole thing is working together. And then where it is you need to start adjusting.
When we think about helping our bodies get back in alignment, because I think that's the word that I was trying to think of, finding that alignment with mind, body, and spirit. Someone like yourself, an integrative wellness doctor, I'm always encouraging people to consider that. If I know that their life is in such a way that, I have a friend right now who is undergoing a very stressful season of her life, and it's manifesting itself in her stomach. Her digestive system is just a wreck because of stress. And I know that's what it is. Like, in other words, it started just like the timing. And I think all of us as women, because we are emotional beings, we internalize everything, right? We take it in and we hold it in our body, and it gets, depending on our proclivities, if you will, it might stick in our body. Like, we might get tense shoulders, we might get an upset stomach, we might get a sore back, we might get headaches. And I think because we get so, and I'm not knocking Western medicine, I just want to say, because Western medicine is very much about a body part and a prescription to fix it, what you do and how you do it is a more of a process, less of a Band-Aid. So just for a moment, talking through what you do with people and leaning into the process of understanding who we are in mind, body, and spirit, how to get into alignment. Are those the same kind of resources as self-care, or are there some other tips that you can give people to kind of reconnect those disconnected parts of themselves so that they're living in more alignment and will help them actually have a better golden years, like we were saying at the beginning?
Right. I think you said it, is understanding that it is a process. I think oftentimes we have become accustomed to or maybe get attached to fixing something relatively quickly. And we want it to be instantaneous, and we want it to be today, if not yesterday, and we want it to be sorted out. And sometimes we might even talk about, integrative process or holistic process, but we're not understanding that it really is a process. And so it may not, it may take some unraveling before putting it back together. It may take some exploration. It definitely takes a lot of input from that person. And sometimes I think people struggle with that, because oftentimes what I might see is that the interpretation of integrated wellness, or the interpretation of holistic oftentimes that I get, is that I don't want to take medication. Can I take an herb for that? And I was like, well, that is really not an integrative wellness process. I mean, a lot of times you can do either or. It may work, it may not, but it's understanding that is, again, you're addressing a symptom with a thing. And so you're still not getting to what may be the root cause of it, or the part that's really foundational in all of it. So it might be uncovering layers at times, and it may seem a long process. But in the end, I would say maybe after, it might be 6 months, it might be a year, but I love it when people get to the other side of that process, and then they go, oh, okay, now I see what you're talking about. And now they're feeling more in tune with their body, more in alignment. They're more aware of when things go off relatively quickly. And because they're no longer living in that space of overwhelm and that space of toxicity, so their bodies are now and are able to alert them more quickly about, this is not working for us. And when they get to that point, oftentimes I was like, you can check in with me, once a year or so, but now that you understand how your whole body really works, I live for that part. I really do. I live for that part when I see that transition happen.
And I think when we're connecting what you're saying right now, and that process that you take your patients or your clients through, is a process and a system that we can take through empty nest. We can take it through caring for our parents. We can take it through a job transition. These tools of leaning into a process and not trying to bail before we've learned what we're supposed to learn, right?
Yes.
And that's hard work.
And it's hard work. That's exactly what I was going to say. And sometimes, it really might feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to do all this. But hard work now or hard work later is usually the way, it works. If you don't do the work now, ultimately, sometimes you have to do the work later. And it's sometimes not in a proactive way. And when your reactive work is a lot more difficult.
So we've talked about so many wonderful things. And honestly, in my head, I'm thinking, Dr. Eudene, I may need to have you back at some point, because there's so many places we could have gone. And I think we kept dipping our toe into different pools, because this is a lifelong learning. This is a lifelong practice of staying in alignment and listening to, getting quiet enough to hear what our bodies and minds are doing, so that we can be more present and more effective in our relationships as well as our own personal pursuits, right?
Yes.
And so as we wrap up our time together, you have a passion. I can hear it. And if you had to kind of give my tribe 3 things you really want them to hear, apply, take away, what would those 3 things be?
Those 3 things would be, emptiness is not the end of the road. It's actually just a transition point. And it's a great opportunity for you to grasp with both hands, so you can start establishing patterns and some lifestyle things that really kind of takes you into that next stage of your life. So you're always living fully, you're always living present, and you're always living healthy.
Excellent. So, grab that transition and use it to your benefit. Okay. What's the second one?
It's never too late to start. I think oftentimes we feel, well, I can't do this now. I'm too old for this. I can't tell you how many times I hear, I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm too, fill in the blanks, whatever it is. It might be too old, too thin, too fat, too tall, whatever it is. You have to, it's never too late. You start now because everything has a starting point. And so the key thing is identify what it is your goals are, what it is you want to experience in the next phase of your life, and start there. Start where you are right now with what you got.
Stop waiting, right?
Stop waiting. It's like, what are you waiting for, And the final thing is, honestly, you and I talked about it. You can do anything. Your brain has the amazing ability. You and I think we are both in love with the neuroscience of, I love the brain. It has the most amazing ability. So don't say you can't. If you look at the neuroscience where you see your brain can actually rebuild, reshape, regrow, reconnect, make new connections, all of these things, you realize that you really do have an unlimited capacity to learn something.
I love that. Unlimited capacity to learn.
Yes.
And that's exciting.
That's exciting. That's really exciting.
Like you, I have a client who's in her 80s, and the growth that she's had over the time that we've coached together, and just watching her come to that place of really realizing her own abilities to choose certain things in her life has been incredible. She's become vibrant again and strong and confident. And there's such beauty to that. And I can look forward to something like that and be encouraged that nothing is impossible.
Yes.
We see something as lost. It might just be misplaced. Pick it back up, find a new iteration of it. Like, don't agree with can't, right?
Yes. Yes. I love that.
Yes, you can, right? Well, Dr. Eudene, it has been a great pleasure to spend this hour with you talking about the things where our hearts are actually, as two people who've never met, our hearts are really knit together with this message of hope and possibility and potential that people have. And I've just really enjoyed hearing your heart today. So thank you for coming on the program and for sharing all that you love about what you do and the heart that you have.
And thank you for allowing me to do so. And I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. I always love to speak with a soul that's on the same level.
Yes. Isn't it just life-giving to connect with someone? It's one of those gifts that life has, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And we could even make that number 4 on the list, right? Connect with people, even if you don't know them, because everyone has a little gift to give another person, even if they don't know it. Connecting with people is such a powerful, life-giving thing.
It is. It is. And I think that's a really important one.
So I have been talking with Dr. Eudene Harry. She specializes in integrative wellness. And if you head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 121, you will find links to connect with Dr. Eudene, the books that she's written. I will also put a link to an integrative provider list that I have from talking to other doctors, so that if you want to find an integrative wellness doctor in your area, you can use that website. And while you're at my website, please leave your name and email address. I have a gift for you. And if you would be so kind, wherever you listen, please subscribe, please rate, please share with your friends. It is so important as we build this community that we share these resources with other women around the world. We have over 100 countries that listen, and we need to reach as many women with these messages of hope and health and wholeness and the ability to live the lives we dream of. My friends, it is completely possible. As Dr. Eudene said, your brain is so powerful. It can rebuild, reshape, and regrow. So go do something this week to take advantage of that powerful brain. And please share this podcast with as many of your friends as you can. As always, I want to thank you all for joining me every week, for listening in, for grabbing a cup of something wonderful and being a part of this powerful conversation. I look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. Until then, make it great, my friends. Take care. Bye-bye.